Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. We're going to open this hour by talking with our friend Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. And we're going to open with this unfortunate bit of news that we found out earlier this morning about the attack in Manchester in the synagogue that killed at least 2. We do know that Bishop John Arnold of Salford has already issued a statement condemning the deadly attack. And this was targeted. This was planned during Yom Kippur. Without a doubt, Yom Kippur is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. It is the Day of Atonement. Now, granted, they don't have a temple, and so the rituals of Yom Kippur that are entailed in the Torah cannot be fulfilled and met. And so every year as the Jews celebrate Yom Kippur, there is a kind of sting as to the lack of liturgical fulfillment, so to speak. And so targeting them on a feast like Yom Kippur becomes an even more pernicious action, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. So we're going to talk about this with Dr. Matthew Bunson. There are a few things that we won't be able to get to in the segment, and we just want to highlight that Pope Leo XIV is... First of all, he's calling for all of us to pray the rosary every day, which is a wonderful thing. And one of his reasons for it is for peace in the world, especially in Gaza. And so he has commended President Donald Trump's proposal for the Gaza peace plan as a realistic proposal. In other words, the Holy Father is hopeful that some kind of peace can be reached in our lifetime in this struggle. And so we have to pray for that. This is one of his intents, and we do have to pray for that. We go on from there to speak with Fr Robert Spitzer. The Christian faith represents most accurately the revelation of God, utilizing even the natural sciences to do so. And therefore, we take a systematic approach to faith, science, and reason with Fr Robert Spitzer. We've done the constant conversation reminding people that really the Catholic Church led the world in terms of not just scientific inquiry, but the scientific method proper, and that it is proper to the Christian life to utilize all of the tools at our disposal, including the natural sciences, to inquire about God. Fr Robert Spitzer enlightened us on applying those principles. All this after the headlines.
Thanks, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Thursday, October 2nd. It's the Feast of the Guardian Angels. Today's news is brought to you by Visiting Angels, providing loving care and assistance for seniors in need at visitingangels.com. Pope Leo is questioning current immigration policies in place in the United States. The pontiff raising the issue while speaking with reporters and questioned if President Trump's policies align with the Catholic Church's pro-life teachings. Leo, who is the first U.S.-born pope, shared that he doesn't know if it is pro-life for someone to oppose abortion, but also be, quote, in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the United States. The pontiff also spoke on Trump's and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's speeches to military leaders Tuesday, saying, quote, this way of speaking is concerning because it shows every time an increase of tension. As the government shutdown continues, the Trump administration is warning that many federal workers could lose their jobs. NBC's Ryan Nobles.
Trump's budget chief, Russell Vought, telling House Republicans yesterday those firings could start in the next 1 to 2 days, according to 2 GOP sources. The White House also targeting funding for Democrat-run states soon after the shutdown began.
Vought apparently warned that money is about to run out for active duty members of the military and for the WIC program for low-income mothers and babies. House Democrats are calling the mass layoffs a negotiating tactic and claim that Republicans will keep firing workers regardless of whether there's a shutdown. A new study highlights the importance of the test for breast cancer. The study in the BMJ finds women who don't get the first screening appointment have a 40% high chance of dying from breast cancer down the road. The study involves hundreds of thousands of people in Sweden who were monitored for up to 25 years. The American Cancer Society recommends most women start getting mammograms at the age of 40. From your AveMariaRadio.net news desk, I'm Steve Clark.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Joining me is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News, and we're talking about current events in light of the life of the church. Matthew, great to speak with you. How are you?
Great to be with you, as always.
Well, thank you very much for making the time to join us. I want to start on some rather urgent news. It's not happy news. It has to do with the attack in Manchester in the synagogue. What do we know so far?
Yeah, obviously this is a developing story, and authorities, as they are wont to do, are obviously not providing too many details at this point. What we do know is that an assailant drove a car into people who were standing outside of a synagogue in Manchester, England, and then began a knife attack. He killed at least 2. He has, according to authorities, wounded at least 4. It has been designated a terrorist attack, and of course the timing of this is horrendous, given that here we are on one of the holiest days for Judaism. And we know also that the police shot and killed the suspect. There was quite a bit of confusion initially, understandably, because the assailant, who's now deceased, as I said, was wearing a vest, and it obviously was difficult to know whether or not he had strapped himself with explosives. And again, it has been designated a terrorist attack coming on Yom Kippur, and obviously the most solemn day in the Jewish calendar, so the timing itself speaks volumes. Both of the victims were members of the Jewish community. It has been decried and denounced by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Obviously, the response from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is one of prayers for the families, and also stating bluntly, quote, "As I warned at the United Nations," he said, "weakness in the face of terrorism only brings more terrorism. Only strength and unity can defeat it." Now, let's add one other important thing, that in the 2 years, almost 2 years now, since Hamas's horrendous attack on Israel and the subsequent military campaign by Israel in Gaza against Hamas, anti-Semitic attacks and incidents have hit record highs, record levels in the United Kingdom, with more than 1,500 incidents reported just in the first half of the year. And again, that would shatter every record. So I think it's the second highest 6-month total reported since a record set over the same period a year earlier. So Europe in general, England in particular, these are becoming very difficult places for the Jewish population to live.
And we keep seeing escalations of violence against the Jewish population in general in these parts of the world. So we'll have to keep an eye out for what the updates of the story is. We don't have any information by way of the person who perpetrated the act. Do we have any information by way of motive, at least?
I have not seen any reliable information on that. I suspect that will be forthcoming. Well, I can add that Bishop John Arnold of Salford has, obviously, I'm speaking on behalf of the British bishops, and the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales obviously released a statement condemning the attack and assuring prayers and solidarity with the Jewish community. So, obviously, we have seen in the United States as well a very significant uptick in anti-Semitic rhetoric, anti-Jewish rhetoric, and also hostility and protests that have taken at times a very dark turn. I live in Washington, D.C. I know of the murder of 2 young Jewish people in the city some months back. So again, this is a difficult time for the Jewish community, and as Christianity itself is assailed around the world, I think there is very much a state of solidarity with Jews who are themselves facing so many attacks and vitriol.
Let's switch gears a little into something of a happier note. This year we are celebrating 600 years since St. Michael's apparitions to Joan of Arc.
Yeah, this is, as you say, this is a very happy story. And this particular moment comes over the centuries. It has been so beautifully represented by great artists. So it was exactly 6 centuries ago in the summer of 1425 that Saint Michael the Archangel arrived in Domremy in France and appeared to a young peasant girl, Jeanne d'Arc. And she was in her father's garden, and according to her testimony, we had angels of paradise, we had St. Catherine, we had St. Margaret calling her, quote, to be a good and holy girl and to respect God's will. And then she was entrusted, as seemingly implausible as that might be, to help save France. And it came in the midst of the 100 Years' War. She was inspired to design a banner that carried the names of our Lord and his mother, the Blessed Mary, and then headed off to save France, basically. She broke the British siege, or the English siege of Orleans, or Orléans, and then helped King Charles VII, the rightful king of France, to his coronation at Rheims in 1429. So this is a really remarkable thing. And to commemorate the anniversary, a pilgrimage of hope was organized across France, and 2,000 faithful sort of marched through Lorraine in northeastern France. It was an incredible weekend, and I would encourage everyone to go to ncregister.com to read Solène Tadier's account of this pilgrimage. This comes on the heels in many ways also of the great pilgrimage to Chartres that we have seen also, that has been attracting thousands of faithful, especially young people, to these great pilgrimages. So France, there's something happening in France, and I love the fact that we're seeing it sort of play out under the banner, so to speak, of Joan of Arc. And
alongside the apparitions of St. Michael, the fact that Joan of Arc was such a stalwart witness to the faith from a very young age becomes yet again another witness to France.
Yeah, it does. I mean, she died burned at the stake, having been sold to the English by the Burgundians. This is a very famous moment in French history, but also in Christian history. And seemingly forgotten, sort of abandoned, it would seem, by so many in the cause for France. And then her holiness was so manifest that the popes ultimately looked at that trial, condemned those who actually condemned her to death, and she became one of the great saints of France and one of the great saints for all of us in her. You said something really important, Marcus, and that is her testimony of the faith, that she was willing to die for her faith. And that she was also, and this is often forgotten, obedient despite the seemingly impossible odds and the unlikelihood. It was so unlikely that a young maiden would be called to save a country. And yet she was obedient to that and accomplished something that was genuinely miraculous, that was simply considered unthinkable. And that's what happens when we respect, as they say, God's will and let him lead us where he wants us to go.
And that also then leads me to yet another thing happening in France, which is Notre Dame Cathedral.
That's right. So Notre Dame Cathedral, which just recently reopened and began functioning again as it should, as the magnificent cathedral in Paris, is now celebrating a first Saturday devotion this coming Saturday. And it's the first time since the cathedral itself was almost destroyed in 2019. So it's being called the First Saturdays of Fatima Jubilee 2025. Various First Saturdays are taking place in various shrines around the world. And in this case, though, this is a perfect place to do it. And again, it's a perfect demonstration of the very clear revival of faith in France.
My guest is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. We're talking about current events in light of church teaching, picking up on the other side. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Resetting your password, unsubscribing from emails, printing anything. Why are simple things sometimes so complicated? Thankfully, with an auto owner's insurance independent agent, getting the right coverage for your business doesn't have to be one of them. So you can get back to more important things, like learning how that printer works. That's simple human sense.
Call Choice Insurance Agency at 734-641-4200. The doctor is in Ann Arbor. Don't miss this chance to join Dr. Ray's studio audience for tapings of his hit TV show, Living Right with Dr. Ray.
The live audience makes the show.
The tapings are October 28th and 29th. 2 shows each night at 5:30 and 7:15 p.m. All shows are at Russell Video in Ann Arbor, and the cost is free.
Without the audience, there is no show.
Just sign up at AveMariaRadio.net.
Very much would love to see you.
Underwritten in part by this not-for-profit.
Hi, this is Mike Ditkin.
Hey, this is Brian May.
Hi, I'm Chris Farley. You're listening to the Kevin Matthews Show.
I thought he was insane. A lot of people thought he was insane.
Nobody could touch us. We had 10 million people listening to us a week. That was my past. If you would have told me I'd be carrying around a broken statue of the Virgin Mary, talking about God, I'd say, are you high?
Broken Mary, the Kevin Matthews Story. In theaters one day only on Tuesday, October 7th. Tickets at brokenmaryfilm.com.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter, talking with Dr. Matthew Bunson of EWTN News. Matthew, so like you were saying just before the break hit, Notre Dame Cathedral is hosting its first Saturday devotion on October the 4th. Is there any other information that we ought to know?
Well, yeah, I think the fact that we're seeing this taking place, the most interesting aspect was that we're seeing the support for this coming from people like Cardinal Raymond Burke and Cardinal Robert Spitzer. They have been very supportive of this entire initiative, and it tells us, too, the importance that they attach to this type of devotion. And the one thing, too, that for those who have this opportunity to attend First Saturday, I think it's well worth doing. It's been something of a forgotten thing. In fact, we see in culture, there's sort of a bizarre secular version of it. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you'll see First Saturdays will appear like in bars and things. So it's a secular aping, so to speak, imitating, but without any of the deep significance of First Saturdays. And so let's recapture that for us. And at Notre Dame Cathedral, you can actually do this if you're in Paris, but wherever you are, you can do this.
And that's exactly one of the exhortations for this coming Saturday. And it allows me to then switch gears again into what's happening with the Holy See. So Pope Leo XIV, his first papal document, which is an apostolic exhortation, is about to be released.
Yeah, that's right. There has been speculation for some time about what he might actually be writing on would be his first document. It was assumed, understandably, that it would be an encyclical, and all of us, and this tells you how accurate we can tend to be, it was assumed that it would be on AI, it would be an encyclical, and it would probably come out early next year. Well, in fact, it would appear, based on a lot of reporting, including by Andrea Gagliarducci, who's a Vatican expert with Aci Stampa, part of EWTN News, that the first papal document, in fact, is going to be an apostolic exhortation. It's different, obviously, from an encyclical, which has, let's just say, higher weight. But an exhortation is pretty much what it sounds like. It is a document that calls us to do things and to reflect. So, for example, one of the most famous post-synodal apostolic exhortations was something like Amoris Laetitia. In this case, the understanding is that this is a document. There were rumors it would be published on the 4th of October, which would be obviously 2 days from now. But there is also reporting that it would be on October 9th, which seems also very appropriate. It's a feast day of St. John Henry Newman. And what is the topic? Everyone is very interested in that. And it is assumed, again, perhaps wrongly, but I think this is accurate, that it will be focusing on the poor, on taking care of those who are in most need. And it is sort of the flowering and completion of a document that was really begun under Pope Francis. And that it's a document that underwent some changes. Obviously, it was suspended because of Pope Francis's death, and then has been moved forward by Pope Leo XIV, in part because he's very faithful to the desires of Pope Francis. I think he's somebody who's very aware of continuity, and as you and I have talked. But it's also a great homage in a way, too, to Benedict XVI, because as we said about the encyclical Lumen Fidei, which was the first of the documents under Pope Francis, most of that had been written by Pope Benedict XVI. And so Pope Francis then brought it to completion. It finished the reflections on the theological virtues, and then was released. And as the famous phrase says, it was a document of 4 hands. So 2 of Pope Francis and 2 of Benedict. In this case, this will be an apostolic exhortation on the care of the poor that has the 2 hands of Pope Francis and the 2 hands of Pope Leo. So there's a symmetry, but also a continuity.
And that symmetry is going to be crucial in talking about, like you mentioned, his own papal magisterium and our discovery of the kind of Holy Father that he is and is going to be. Yeah, exactly. And it's whether it's the 4th, which was assumed for a while, which is, of course, the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, which would make a certain internal logic, or if it's the 9th on the feast day of St. John Henry Newman, both of those have deep significance. Francis of Assisi for his obvious connections to Pope Francis, but also to the poor. He was himself called Il Poverello, the little poor man. But choosing the 9th would also have a remarkable symmetry because, as we have talked, on November 1st, it is expected that Pope Leo will officially, formally declare John Henry Newman the 38th Doctor of the Church. So this, in some ways, is building anticipation toward that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, whatever date this comes out. Right. Because this will be the first major document to come out under Pope Leo. And I think it will begin, even if it's built out of the hopes and vision of Pope Francis, this will give us some really important glimpses into the mind of our Holy Father. Yep. And that, just to switch gears very quickly, speaking of documents coming out of the mind of the Holy Father, but in general, is there going to be a joint Catholic-Muslim document on AI? Yeah, well, here we are 6 years removed from the document on human fraternity. We are 5 years removed from the document Fratelli Tutti by Pope Francis. Is there going to be, that's one of the questions, is there another joint document to be signed with the Muslim world? Again, the reporting of Andrea Gagliarducci would indicate that, yes, that is the case. Okay. And what's going to be the topic? Well, as you said, AI. This is relevant to all of us. Every religion, every culture right now is being impacted by artificial intelligence. And as is reported, this document focused on what? It's on the ethics of artificial intelligence, in part because, as I was just saying, how can fraternity impact how we talk to each other, how we deal with each other? That was one of the keys in many ways in dealing with the whole world on the part of Pope Francis. AI is impacting all of that. And to have then this cooperation, I think, is important because it does
have this influence on interreligious dialogue, that we share our concerns and our recognition of the opportunities with artificial intelligence. But then it also ties directly into the document on human fraternity that was considered a bit of a watershed. Obviously, when it came out, there was some controversy about some of the language in it. But as is very clear, the push that it has assisted, let's put it that way, on affirming pluralism as both a religious and a humanitarian value, correcting what some would argue are stereotypes about Islam, but also really giving encouragement to moderate religious leadership, certainly in the Muslim world, at a time when we are still seeing real radical Islam all over the world, in particular in places like Nigeria and elsewhere with the persecution and massacres of Christians, which brings down to one of the other key points that's been raised, and that is that authentic fraternity, in this case, can help to protect religious and other types of minorities across the Arab world, in particular Christian minorities who, as you and I have both talked many times, are severely oppressed and facing a pretty bleak time.
Yep. And we truly look forward to news of development of hope. We're running out of time, Matthew. Just want to say thank you so much for making the time to speak with us.
A privilege to be with you, as always. Look forward to talking with you next week.
So many things I wish we could have gotten to.
Always.
My guest has been Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. We tried to cover as much as we could today, but do continue to check out the Catholic News Agency and National Catholic Register to stay up to date with what's happening in the life of the Church. Stay tuned. I'm Fr Spitzer.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
I'm Jack Crisula. Please join us Thursday, October 9th, 6:30 p.m. at St. John's Resort for the Rosary, followed by a speech by Father Steve Matea entitled, Don't Look Back, Living the Exodus. Father Matea is parochial vicar of St. John Fisher Chapel University Parish at Oakland University. No registration is required. For more information, please email jack.crisula, Krasula, at trustinus.com. Thank you. God bless.
Ever thought you'd make a bundle by trading in or selling your used vehicle only to find out it's worth a dinner for two? Well, it's much more valuable to donate your vehicle to Ave Maria Radio. Thousands of Americans donate their vehicle each year. The donation to Ave Maria is easy, tax-deductible, and supports our efforts to evangelize. A year from now, will you remember that dinner or your gracious and selfless donation? Go to AveMariaRadio.net to find out more. That's AveMariaRadio.net.
The truth is this. None of us will ever live long enough to learn from our own mistakes. We must learn from each other. That includes heeding the advice from others. I ask questions. It's not only because I'm a trained journalist and a certified life and leadership coach. It's because I'm a curious person. I want to know things. I also realize there's so much I don't know. Pride not only prevents people from learning, it's one of the 7 deadly sins. It takes humility to admit you don't know the answer or that you made a mistake. There's nothing shameful about humbling yourself in the Lord, asking for forgiveness, seeking counsel, and getting advice. Don't perish in pride. Find your potential by pursuing the knowledge of others. As Christians, we are meant to be in community. I pray that God brings the people in my life to lead me in the direction He wants me to go, because I realized a long time ago I don't always know where to turn. This has been a Christ-Centered Communication message. I'm Vanessa Dunha Garmo, a communications evangelist and host of Epiphany.
Support for this Ave Maria radio program comes in part by the non-for-profit St. Anthony Services. Are you shopping for mortgage products, Catholic investing, Catholic health, real estate, or estate planning? StAnthonyServices.org can help you find a Catholic professional for these needs. They regularly connect faithful citizens with faith-based professionals that share our Christian values. More information at StAnthonyServices.org or 877-LIFE-US1.
When the need for senior care arises, home is where the heart is. Visiting Angels provides home care for mom or dad up to 24 hours per day, including personal care, meals, and light housework. You may select your professional caregiver with Visiting Angels. More information at visitingangels.com or at 877-374-LIVE. That's 877-374-LIVE. Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. There's this constant dialogue that's being put out, this constant narrative that the faith is incongruent to reason and the sciences, and that the enlightened way is to leave the incredulity of faith behind and to embrace the empirical reality of the sciences. Fr Robert Spitzer has made it so that we have even more scientific evidence that proves things that are pivotal to our faith, such as the passion and resurrection of Jesus from the Shroud of Turin, the real presence of Jesus in the Holy Eucharist from Eucharistic miracles, and the supernatural dimension of apparitions of Mary. I'm looking at his newest book, Christ, Science, and Reason, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles. Fr Robert Spitzer is the president of the Marges Center of Reason and Faith and the Spitzer Center. Father, it's great to speak with you. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How about you, Marcus?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. I have to say, I have such an appreciation for the systematic manner of your presentation in this line of argument for this book. Simply, to put it simply, this systematic argumentation of how reason is congruent with the faith. So I want to start by simply saying this. The Christian faith represents most accurately the revelation of God. Let's begin there. What does it mean to say that?
Yeah, well, I think that the revelation of God comes out through a variety of different means. And if you want consistency between faith and science, for example, or faith and reason, the Christian faith certainly does that and always has done that. But I think the fullest revelation of God is his unrestricted and unconditional love, especially even for sinners and even the most egregious of sinners. And this is something in the history of religions that never really got specified, except, of course, by Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And he does this in so many different ways. I mean, if you want the, as it were, the revelation of God as love, and love as our highest capacity. So in other words, what is purely positive? I mean, if you really are talking about agape love, self-sacrificial love, noble love that gives itself for the good of the other, regardless of whether the other can, repay. If you look at that principle, how can it ever do evil?
Yep.
So our power to love is our greatest power. We can know this from simple reason. But your intellect, you can do evil with your intellect. You can do evil with your beauty. You can do evil with your athletic capabilities. You can do evil with every other power you've got. But the one thing that you have that'll never do evil, that'll always do something positive, that'll always build up the world, that'll always unify the human community is your power of love. And isn't it interesting that this was revealed to us first by Jesus Christ when he talked about, his father being the father of the prodigal son, for example, or calling his father Abba, or calling love the highest commandment, which means essentially it is the commandment to which all other commandments and virtues are reporting, as it were. So all these things are present, and yet you find that now that we sort of do a subsequent reflection on this philosophically, it's pretty clear that love is, the highest commandment. It's our most positive power. It's our most constructive and unifying power. And yet, now it's so clear in light of Jesus' revelation. A God of love would be the God of perfect being. I can see just how that works. And perfect being, being God is certainly a very provable proposition.
That's right.
And then love being the perfection of being is a provable proposition. But we just didn't realize it until Jesus came along and gave it to us on a silver platter. Not even Socrates, the great virtuous Socrates, never got to that principle. But it took Jesus to do it, and boy, when he did it, it changed the world. Automatically the Catholic Church became, the number one, let's say, public education institution, started educating all the slaves. Until this very day, by the way, the Catholic Church controls maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 98,000 primary schools, 48,000 secondary schools, and 1,700 universities. It is the largest by far educational institution internationally in the world. And secondly, just take a look at health care. The Catholic Church still controls 26% of the health care in the world. Bar none. And then you take a look at public welfare, like orphanages, or groups at soup kitchens that help people who are destitute and in need, and things of that nature. The Catholic Church is the number one international organization, public welfare, in the world by far. And you say, well, how did that happen? It goes all the way back to the time of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
It goes all the way back to his, whatsoever you do for these least ones of mine, you do unto me. I was hungry, and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me to drink, etc.
Father,
all these things.
If you don't mind, Father, before we continue on another train of thought, I really want to ask you to just expound to us the historicity of the person of Jesus Christ, the historical evidence for Jesus. And I'm saying this because when I taught high school, for example, it's a very prevalent, albeit rather ignorant position that's being held now, that Jesus Christ didn't exist, or if he did, he was nothing more than a good moral teacher.
Yeah, there are four basic approaches to the historicity of Jesus. First, of course, is the historical approach itself. So I'm going to just move the scriptures down for a second and just go to history. So we have three very fine sources of Jesus' life, crucifixion, and miracles that come from three hostile sources who lived around the time of Jesus. Cornelius Tacitus, for example, was a Roman historian. Did he like Christianity or Jesus? No, he did not. But he testifies right up front that, Jesus Christ exists during the reign of the procurator Pontius Pilate. He was crucified or suffered the extreme penalty under that procurator during the reign of Tiberius. We can see from Flavius Josephus, he was a Jewish historian. Was he pro-Christian? No, he wasn't. He was writing for the Roman government. Yet around 90 AD, he talks about Jesus being a wise man who was a miracle worker, right? He was doing these stupendous acts. He formed the Christian church, and he suffered the extreme penalty under Pontius Pilate, once again, during the reign of Tiberius. Then we also, of course, there's the the Babylonian Talmud does not put, it's a Jewish document, obviously, puts the emphasis on Jesus' miracle working, but attributes it to his being basically a sorcerer, so kind of an evil type person, but nevertheless attributes the fact that he was doing these miraculous deeds that were, winning people over, and furthermore, talks about his crucifixion on the night of the Passover, etc. So, I mean, we've got, with these three sources, I mean, no one can coherently deny. I mean, these sources, why, living at the time, near the time of Jesus, why in the world would they be testifying to him if he didn't exist? And so clearly, I think there's no doubt about his historicity. But then you have to go, one step further, and you have to, a second area is what's called historical criteria that are used, and these were articulated initially by people like Joachim Jeremias, who was a great respondent to Rudolf Bultmann, a very fine fellow. Should I wind this up?
Yes, Father. And we'll continue this on the other side. My guest, Father Robert Spitzer, president of the Marges Center for Reason and Faith and the Spitzer Center. We're talking about his new book, Christ, Science, and Reason, what we can know about Jesus, Mary, and the miracles. Stay tuned. I'm Mark Peter.
The Wine Palace in Livonia is a proud sponsor of Ave Maria Radio. The Wine Palace is a family-owned business for over 60 years where customers come in for a great service. The 9,000 square foot store includes a humidor, specialty wine room, and a rare and collectible spirits room. We have the largest selection of spirits in the state at the most competitive prices. Ask for one of the brothers, Cliff or Kelly, and thank them for their strong support of Catholic Radio. Delivery is available. Please visit the Wine Palace at I-96 in Middlebelt or at winepalacemi.com.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at AveMaria.com. That's AveMaria.com.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
Every woman deserves specialized health care. At Arbor Women Health, our team of compassionate professionals listen to our patients and want to understand what they're going through. They serve everyone from teen girls to seniors. Our faith-based clinicians specialize in obstetrics, gynecology, fertility awareness and crisis, or unexpected pregnancies. Call 734-930-4020 or visit arborwomenhealth.org. Arbor Women, faith-inspired, dignity-affirming healthcare.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popchak.
We'd all love to do more to serve others, but where do you find the time? Well, it's easy if you remember that Christian service begins at home. Remind your family that everything God's given you is meant to be passed on to other brothers and sisters in the Lord when you're done. Encourage your family to take good care of the clothes, toys, furniture, and other blessings you've been given so that others can delight in them when it's their turn. Then, once per season, as a family, gather the gently used clothes, toys, and other goods you've finished enjoying and bring them to your parish or other community center that can donate them to other families who are waiting to be blessed as you have been. To discover more ways your family can celebrate the liturgy of domestic church life, check out the newest editions of Parenting with Grace and visit CatholicCounselors.com. I'm Dr. Greg Popchak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
You like pizza? Me too. And for that, we can thank our friend, Tom Monahan. First, he starts with $900 and opens one pizza shop. Then it's worldwide, thousands of shops. But all this was just a warm-up for his greatest achievement yet. He built a university.
God inspired Tom to build up generations of men and women who have a hunger to reach the world for Christ. This place is Ave Maria University.
Visit avemaria.edu to see what's next.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Mark Spitzer. My guest is Fr Robert Spitzer, and we are talking about his new book, Christ, Science, and Reason. Father, we were talking earlier about, you had just started on the historicity of the Gospels and the Gospel accounts. So let's pick up from there.
Right. So there are 10 criteria of historicity. And these are, the principle of discontinuity, the principle of unity. There's all kinds of principles there. And if you look at, the New Testament Gospels in light of these 10 criteria of historicity, you can actually validate about 20% of the different pericopes in the New Testament just by submitting them to these historical criteria. Mm-hmm. Again, it's a very good indication of the historicity of the New Testament, multiple attestation of different kinds. And by the way, I have another book called Science, Reason, and Faith, Discovering the Bible, where I have a whole section on these criteria of historicity and their application to the New Testament. There's a third area. I wanted to just put in one more thing. Yes, there's a man by the name of Richard Bauckham. Mm-hmm. He's written a book called Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. It's an excellent book. He's senior scholar at Cambridge University. And in this book, he basically elucidates pretty much the rationale for why the traditional application of Old Testament form criticism to the New Testament is just haplessly wrong and just cannot really come to a valid conclusion regarding the New Testament, which doesn't have huge periods of time between the actual events and the writing of the documents. And so he proposes a replacement for traditional form criticism, which really is, I think, very convincing. And he has, of course, a whole group of people, that would be agreed with by the third quest for the historical Jesus, guys like N.T. Wright or John P. Meyer, or in other cases, would be supplemented by, several different Scandinavian schools and Martin Hengel and the German school and so forth. So then the third big area is the whole thing of the exponential increase in the Christian church. So when you actually take a look at every other messianic movement around the time of Jesus, you can see that after the death of the Messiah, the quote-unquote so-called Messiah, that messianic movement died out within about 35, 40 years. In the case of Christianity, it is so radically opposite of that, because Christianity actually grows exponentially after the death of its Messiah and persecution, public execution, and then literally 200 years of persecution that goes on, before 313 A.D. With the Edict of Milan by Constantine. You see that under this severe persecution, you have this exponential increase in Christianity all over Europe and the Middle East. And so you have to just ask yourself, why? And all these third quest guys, like John P. Meyer, are saying, why? Why would that be? And Meyer and his group come to the conclusion, really, there's only one explanation. The apostles are doing a proliferation of miracles, and the apostles and their successors are performing miracles prolifically, and they're doing it in the name of Jesus. And this really has a profound influence on the Christian church, because you got to ask yourself, hey, if the apostles are not telling the truth about Jesus as risen from the dead, Jesus as the Son of God, why in the world would God be working miracles through their hands in the name of Jesus? Right. So, of course, that makes a lot of sense to a lot of people, and I think it really did happen. There's another line. Go ahead.
But I'd like to press into that a little more in terms of some of the patristic evidence, too. One of the strongest arguments of the fathers for proof of the resurrection, proof of the apostles' faith in the resurrection, is that because they believed in the resurrection, they ran to martyrdom. They were unafraid of death meeting them in light of persecution, which for the other messianic movements was not the case.
That is absolutely the case, and very correct indeed. So they endured persecution and, as you put it, martyrdom exceedingly well, and they did it, as a witness. But of course, they were assured by the apostolic witness, assured of their own resurrection by dying for the faith, and they definitely did not question the resurrection because of the strength of the apostolic witness, and I think also because of their willingness to die for Jesus, and the miracles that they performed almost seemingly on a daily, if not maybe a couple of times per day, feats that were truly considered stupendous. So for all those reasons, you're basically dealing with people that are really convinced that Jesus was risen from the dead, as he said.
So aside from apostolic witness, which we know to be completely historically credible, there's also extra-biblical witness that attests to the historicity of the resurrection.
Oh, yeah. This is put together by a fellow named N.T. Wright in his book called The Resurrection of the Son of God. What Wright discovered was that the Christian message tried to stay very close to Second Temple Judaism, right? So in other words, this was a doctrinal program that existed from during the whole time of the building of the Second Temple after, the Babylonian exile. The Jewish people come back, they build the Second Temple, and from that time onward, from the Second Temple all the way to the 70 years after the time of Jesus, there is a pretty solid group of doctrines that are held not only by the Jewish people but by Christians. Christians wanted to maintain that Old Testament revelation, that Jewish revelation, that Jewish doctrine from which they believed Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the way through not just the patriarchs, but also, of course, through Moses and the later prophets. And so they tried to stick close to it, but there are these two areas where they didn't stick close to it at all. And one of them is the area of the resurrection, the other is the area of the Messiah. Right. Let me just stick with the resurrection right now. What Wright discovered was, first, the Jewish notion of resurrection, was a physical resurrection. So it was like a resuscitated physical body, but it pretty much looked like our body, but it would be a physical body that keep on living forever, more or less like we live today. Christianity said, no, we're going to be like Jesus was in his resurrection appearance. We're going to be transformed in spirit and power and glory. Of course, this is writ large in 1 Corinthians 15 very, very clearly, but also is present in the first letter of John, and of course implicitly in the gospel narratives themselves. So when you start looking at this, this Jewish idea, and Paul says it starkly. Here's a second big differentiation. In addition to the spiritual resurrection of the body, Paul says, hey, the doctrine of the resurrection is the central, most foundational doctrine that we have. That was not so for Second Temple Judaism. Second Temple Judaism held resurrection to be a very peripheral doctrine, maybe about 50 on the list of doctrines. Paul says if this one...
There was also contention between the Pharisaic cult and Sadducee cult about the resurrection itself. It was peripheral.
That's correct, absolutely. But even for the Pharisees, it was pretty peripheral, but it existed. Whereas for the Sadducees, it was totally peripheral because they didn't believe in it. So, the idea is that for Christianity, it's the number one resurrection. If Jesus is not risen from the dead, then our preaching is in vain. Your faith is worthless, and all those who have died in Christ have died in their sins. And what's more, we emerge as perjurers before God and the worst of all men. If Christ is not risen from the dead, then we are the most pitiable of all people. Well, that sort of says this is a number one doctrine upon which all other doctrines are hanging. Now, that kind of importance is nowhere to be found in Second Temple Judaism. That it is asserted again and again, not only by St. Paul, but others in the New Testament. So what he does is he says, the resurrection, the Christian view of the resurrection is filled with these 5 mutations or differentiations from Second Temple Judaism, and there's just no explaining it except one way. That the Christians, large groups of Christians, like, the 500 of the brethren, not just the apostles, but 500 of the brethren who witnessed the risen Jesus all at once, some of whom, have died, but most are still there, right? And so forth. So you look at that and you say, oh, okay, so this large group of witnesses sees Jesus. Well, how did that affect the doctrine? They saw him risen in spirit, in power, in glory. He was transformed. Yeah. They didn't think he was a resuscitated corpse. Yes, there are some paintings that make Jesus look like a resuscitated corpse, but you won't find that in the Gospels. What you see in the Gospels is when Jesus appears, let's say in Matthew's Gospel, on the mountain there to his apostles, they all bow down and worship. Well, worship, as Matthew says earlier in his gospel, in the temptations in the desert, worship is reserved for God alone. Him alone shall you serve. Well, everybody is bowing down and worshiping. They think they're seeing God. At which point, Jesus, if you didn't get that, Jesus says, full power and authority on heaven and earth has just been given over to me. That pretty much shows the divinity of who they're seeing, and that's evident in John's Gospel too, by the use of the hakurios.
Thank you so much, Father. I always enjoy our conversations. My guest has been Fr Robert Spitzer, president of the Margis Center. We're talking about reasons and science for us to believe in the Gospels. Until tomorrow, for Ave Maria in the afternoon, I'm Marcus Peter.